The human nurse was only a volunteer. Most people look at a human and see a soft, slow creature with no claws and no visible armor. They are wrong because they are looking at the wrong scale. Inside every human being, there is a biological warfare network so complex and so violent that it has spent 4 billion years winning an arms race against 1 trillion different enemies. We call it an immune system, but to the rest of the galaxy, it is a nightmare that never sleeps. The morning on Threshold 9 started with the usual low-gravity hum. For Elena, the station's 0.6G felt like walking through a dream, or perhaps like being a ghost. She was a volunteer nurse, a 32-year-old human who had come to the diplomatic sector because she wanted to see the stars without carrying a rifle. Back on Earth, she had been a trauma surgeon, but here she was mostly a curiosity. She spent her days checking the hydration levels of the Muchins, those gentle empaths who flinched at loud noises, and ensuring the Gerlach patients had enough hydraulic fluid for their oversized cardiovascular systems. The medical wing was a masterpiece of sterile architecture. The walls were a warm off-white with muted sage green trim, and the lighting was a soft, diffused glow designed to create an artificial calm. It was the kind of place that wanted you to relax, which was always the first thing that worried a human. Elena's supervisor was a T-Velan named Professor Cavalan. He had 4 arms, and his rear pair stayed pressed tight against his thorax whenever Elena moved too quickly. To a T-Velan, human movement was unsettling. Elena moved like still water, displacing almost nothing, every joint in her body absorbing its own impact. It was the movement of a pursuit predator from a high-gravity death world, and no matter how many smiles she gave, the alien staff could feel 10,000 generations of selection pressure in her every step. Elena began her shift by checking the monitors. The station smelled of industrial lemon and ozone. It was a comforting scent for most, but for Elena, it masked the subtle shifts in the air that her instincts were already picking up. She walked the long corridors of the ward, her footsteps nearly silent against the hard composite floor. She was wearing soft-soled coverings on her feet, and even accounting for that, the sound she produced was minimal. It was not training. It was not technique. It was the result of a world where making noise while you moved meant something with bigger teeth heard you first. Everything changed at 0600 hours. The alarm did not wait for permission to scream. It was not a drill alarm. It was a deep, resonant vibration that traveled through the walls and the synth granite floors, a frequency specifically calibrated to activate the threat recognition pathways of every species on the station simultaneously. Unauthorized biological hazard detected in the Eastern Bioresearch Wing. Classification: active, pathogen index, apex. The words from the station's intelligence system settled over the ward like a physical weight. Elena felt the air pressure hold steady, but the thermal gradient across the room began to shift. In the tiered seating of the recovery lounge, 31 students and patients stiffened. A Palori girl in the front row, a species with chemoceptor tendrils so sensitive they could taste the composition of a room, went rigid. Her tendrils locked straight out from her skull in a predator proximity alarm. She was unconscious before she hit the floor. Beside her, a Velith male began vomiting with violent immediacy. His digestive system was rejecting its contents in a panic response triggered by a chemical signature his biology identified as certain death. "Elena, get back," Professor Cavalan shouted, his voice cracking into the sharp clicking of a T-Velan distress call. "It's a Class-12 pathogen. Containment is breached." Elena didn't move back. She moved forward. On Earth, the biosphere contains an estimated 1 trillion distinct microbial species. Humans have survived them not through avoidance, but through an internal biological warfare system of such staggering complexity that it has no parallel in the galactic database. Every second of every day, from birth until death, A human body is not a single organism. It is a battlefield, the apex. Plague was a biomechanical virus recovered from a dead system in the mid-spiral. It was designed to target the nervous system first, taking control of the brain and turning the host into a coordinated, mindless soldier before the body even realized it was sick. To the species of the Galactic Council, who had evolved on lush, habitable worlds with minimal microbial competition, the virus was an extinction-level threat. It was a predator wearing a microscopic skin. As the red emergency lighting bathed the ward in a dull, bloody glow, Elena watched the T-Velan staff collapse one by one. Their immune systems were like the station's energy shields, ridiculous, gleaming assemblies that worked until something physical punched through them. The virus wasn't just attacking, it was dismantling them. Elena felt a slight tightening in her chest, a flicker of heat. Her internal sensors, the ones she had carried since she was a child in the cities of Earth, were already reporting for duty. Her body had detected the breach. It was identifying the foreign organisms, cataloging their structure, and developing targeted countermeasures. Inside her veins, the war had begun. Her white cell mobilization time was faster than a Class 3 battlefield nanite suite. Her blood, saturated with iron and hemoglobin, was literally building a wall molecule by molecule. The virus tried to latch onto her neural pathways, but it found a cognitive architecture characterized by a threat processing speed it couldn't map. Elena stood in the center of the chaos, the only living thing still upright. "Station AI," she said, her voice calm and level, directed at the room without raising it. "Status of medical synthesizers." "Synthesizers offline," the AI responded in its flat, precise tone. "Pathogen has compromised the station's primary relay network. Security response estimated at 11 minutes. 11 minutes. For the Muchins and the T-Velans, 11 minutes was 10 minutes too long to be dead. Elena remembered the records of a Luldran Reach, where 3,000 people waited 19 hours for a committee to vote on saving them. She wasn't going to wait. Elena looked at her hands. They were the hands that could shatter laboratory glass, the hands of a creature from a world that had spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything on it. She walked to the central diagnostic hub, her footsteps nearly silent against the hard floor. "If we wait for the machines, everyone in this ward dies," she muttered to herself. She remembered a detail from a survey paper she had read about human biology. The adrenal response is self-reinforcing. The more a human fights, the better they get at fighting. She needed to be the filter. The virus was airborne, a cloud of biomechanical gnats that ate the eyes and the voices of its victims. It was looking for a host it could overcome. Elena opened her own medical kit and pulled out a standard-issue trauma sealant tube and a length of tubing meant for a hydraulic bypass. She wasn't going to fix a machine. She was going to use herself as the machine. She sat on the floor, cross-legged, in the middle of the ward where the air scrubbers were failing. She took the tubing and inserted it into her own brachial vein. The red fluid, saturated with industrial-grade iron, the same element used in warship hull construction, flowed into the tube. "AI," she commanded, "redirect the air intake for the ward through the bypass circuit in my hand. I am the secondary filter." "Warning," the AI said. "Biological signature of human volunteer is currently hosting a Class 12 conflict. Exposure to ward atmosphere will increase pathogen load by 4,000%. "Do it," Elena said. In the dark of the red-lit room, the sound of the air shifting was like a city breathing. The atmosphere of the ward, thick with the biomechanical plague, was pulled into the makeshift filter Elena had created. Her own blood, her warfare network, was now the only thing standing between the plague and the survivors. She could feel it now. The pressure. It was like persistence predation, the hunting method of her ancestors. She wasn't winning in a burst. She was chasing the virus, following it through her own systems, exhausting it. The plague was fast, but Elena's immune system could run forever. It followed the virus when it ran, it followed it when it hid, and it kept following until the pathogen's structure simply stopped because it could not run anymore. Her face changed color. It went from its usual tone to a deeper pink, then red. Fluid formed on her skin, sweat, an excretory thermoregulation system that was dumping the excess heat of the internal war. The temperature sensors mounted around her station registered something the AI couldn't believe. The air immediately surrounding the human was measurably cooler than the rest of the room. She was air-conditioning her own body while maintaining a biological output that would have crushed any other species in the cohort. Minutes felt like hours. Elena's vision began to blur at the edges. She was tired, bone-deep tired, the kind of pain that comes from a trauma so ancient it feels foundational. But she did not stop. Humans do not need to be brave, they just need to be operational. She processed the fear as a problem requiring a solution. At the 9-minute mark, the first T-Velen technician groaned. The blue glow in his eyes, the mark of the biomechanical virus, began to fade. He blinked in confusion, looking around like he was waking from a dream. Elena's blood had done it. Her immune system had catalogued the virus, built the antibodies, and as her blood cycled through the makeshift filter, it was broadcasting the kill code back into the air. She was a living vaccine. When the security team finally breached the doors, they didn't find a slaughterhouse. They found a stunned Korvathi stalker. No, they found a ward full of survivors. And in the center, they found a human girl, her jacket torn, her hands covered in her own iron-rich blood, looking up at them with the calm, focused expression of someone who had finished one task and was ready for the next. The squad leader, a heavily armored alien who had seen 23 first contacts fold like wet paper, stopped 3 paces from her. He looked at the tubing, he looked at the survivors, and then he looked at Elena. "You acted as a living filter for an apex plague," he asked, his voice a synthesized rumble of disbelief. Elena leaned back against the diagnostic hub and pulled the tube from her arm. She reached into her bag and produced a small wrapped granola bar. "It was just a Tuesday," she said, her hands shaking with the fine tremor of an adrenaline crash. "I survived Monday. Everything else is fine." That evening, the Academy's Central Species Classification database updated. The field next to human refreshed from pending review to a new designation in bright alert coloring, Class-12, Deathworld Organism. But beneath that, a single new line appeared, written by an observer who had watched the sensor feeds for 4 hours and 17 minutes in total silence. Recommendation: do not mistake their falling for weakness. They have been falling and getting back up for 300,000 years. We mistook the falling for the end of the story. We never thought to look at what happened next. The apex plague was a warning, one the Galactic Council wrote into its own laws with its own hands so it would never forget. They learned that day that a human body is not just a person. It is a promise that when the galaxy gets sick, when the predators get too big, and when the silence of death starts to scream, there is one species that will stand in the middle of the bridge and refuse to move. They don't wait for permission to save people they care about. And they don't need your help to make that decision matter. This matters because we live in a galaxy that has spent 3,000 cycles pretending that conflict doesn't exist. We built a civilization by ignoring the shadows. The humans built theirs by mastering them. They remind us that true peace isn't the absence of a threat. It is the presence of the strength required to stop it. The next time you see a human volunteer, do not look at their lack of claws. Do not look at their soft skin. Look at the iron in their blood and the war in their veins. And then, for the sake of your own survival, pray that they consider you a friend. If you want to understand what else humanity is hiding behind that disarming smile, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for the next chapter of the great human underestimation. Drop a comment below and tell me, if you were on Threshold 9, would you have trusted the human nurse? Because the humans are already out here. And they're just getting started. Elena's recovery took place in a private room. For the first time in station history, a human was the most valuable asset on Threshold 9. Scientists from the Ogeron Choir arrived to study her. They wanted to understand the kill code her immune system had generated. They sat across from her with their feathered crests pressed flat in distress. They looked at her as if she were a god or a bomb. "How did you know your body could process it?" one scientist asked. "I didn't," Elena said, sipping a cup of the station's terrible bitter coffee. "But on my world we have things called food chains. Only they aren't chains. They are tangles. Predators eat predators. Fungi dissolve you from the inside. We started in the middle of that mess. We were prey for a long time. Big cats, wolves, crocodiles, they all ate us." The scientist made a soft sound of horror. "We survived because we never stopped," Elena continued. "We got sick, and our bodies learned the sickness and destroyed it from the inside. We ate poison, and our bodies figured out how to process it as fuel. We grew up on a world where the gravity is double what you call standard. Everything on my planet is trying to crush us, infect us, or eat us. You call it a death world, we call it home." As the days passed, Elena became a bridge. Other species began to visit the ward, not as patients, but as observers. They saw a girl who missed her home, who missed a place called Volgrad, and who missed the smell of real rain. They saw the monster failing an art exam and laughing at jokes that weren't funny. The Terran Confederation and 12 other species signed independent security agreements with Earth that month. The Gerans, who lacked appendages for violence, requested human protection. The galaxy was changing. It was moving from a beautiful, fragile fantasy into a hard, effective reality. The Council's High Speaker finally spoke on the matter during a closed session. "The humans did not abandon peace," he said. "They redefined it for a galaxy that had forgotten how to fight. They remind us that the currency of diplomacy is not fear, but the ability to stand as equals." Elena stood by the window of the observation deck on her final night before her rotation ended. She looked out at the 7 gathered stars. She wasn't carrying a weapon. She was carrying the memory of 9 billion people who counted on her not to believe a pretty song. "Commander." A voice said behind her. It was Saul, the voice of the Eluan people. "Will you ever set it down, the second skeleton you carry, the watch you keep while the rest of us sleep?" Elena smiled. It was the real one, the one that showed teeth, the one that made Saul's hindbrain scream. "I don't think so." She said, "And that might be the saddest thing about us. We will sit in your new Concorde for 1,000 years, and we will smile at our friends. But the entire time, some quiet part of us will be counting the exits, watching the seams in the walls, waiting for the knife that may never come." "Then it is a wound," Saul whispered. "Maybe," Elena said, "but it's the only reason we're still alive to have this conversation. A wound that keeps you alive should just be called a scar." As her transport lifted off the following morning, the station's crew stood at the viewports. They didn't see a maid or a volunteer nurse. They saw a Class-12 Deathworld Organism. They saw the iron. They saw the war. And as the human ship became a point of light in the distance, the galaxy went silent, sitting with the weight of what it had learned. "We have been falling and getting back up for 300,000 years. You mistook the falling for the end of the story. You never thought to look at what happened next. Humanity is already out here, and we are just getting started. If you want to see what happens when the rest of the galaxy finally pushes a human to their limit, hit that like button. Subscribe so you don't miss the next report from the frontier, and tell me in the comments, do you think the galaxy is ready for us? Because we've been waiting for you." And we brought snacks. Now, you might think Elena was an outlier. You might think she was a 1 in a billion miracle. But to understand the true depth of the situation, we have to look at the numbers. The reports from Threshold 9 were 91 pages long. Analysts like Belshara, a Velkarth whose skin is the color of pale ash, spent hundreds of hours trying to find a mistake. They looked for negligence. They looked for technical errors. They found none. The human body had simply performed as designed on Earth. The gravity index is 1.0. The galactic median is 0.6. This means every breath Elena took, every heartbeat that pushed that iron-saturated blood through her system was happening with twice the force of a standard galactic citizen. When she walked, her muscles were counteracting a load that would slowly crush most other species over the course of a single standard year. And then there is the matter of the Shatterpoint. At the Predator Academy on Outpost Drevok, they run a simulation. It is 6 hours of complete sensory distress. It removes all light. It generates audio of your friends dying. It drops the temperature until your body begins to fail. Most recruits, Velgari, Cathari, even the six-limbed warriors from Velgut Prime break. They scream, they cry, they shut down. When a human named Dario Voss was put through the Shatterpoint, his biometrics remained steady. At the 5-hour mark, he was bored. He took off his boot and tapped it against the floor just to have something to do. When the lights came back on, he stretched and said, "That was like a Tuesday." This is the cognitive architecture the galaxy is now forced to contend with. Humans solve problems under duress. They improvise tools from environmental materials. They form social bonds across species lines with an ease that suggests their empathy response is not limited to their own kind. They can feel fear and continue to act. They can feel pain and continue to think. They are generalists of such comprehensive capability that the very concept of a weak point does not apply to them. The unauthorized entry clause was the first step. It was a law written in blood after a Luldran Reach, where help arrived 19 hours too late. Humanity told the Council, "If you make us wait again, we will not wait. We will act, and we will deal with the consequences afterward." They don't want to be predators. Elena told the Aluan delegate that humans had been alone on their world for 200,000 years because everything else either ran from them or tried to kill them. They left their world looking for classmates, not prey, but they brought their warfare network with them just in case. The galaxy used to be a place of singing light and pretty songs. It was a beautiful, fragile fantasy. The humans didn't break that fantasy because they were cruel. They broke it because they knew there was a knife behind the smile. They knew it because they had spent their entire history being the knife and the smile at the same time. So, what happens next? The United Earth Republic's war fleet is already assembled at Waypoint Kestrel. They have 73 warships, and 31 of them carry weapons systems that aren't in any public registry. They aren't looking for a fight. They're looking to make sure no one else starts one. As Admiral Sarah Chen said during the emergency session after the Columbus Station attack, "I am not interested in punishing the enemy. I am interested in making it impossible for them to do this again." That is the human way: precision, restraint, and an overwhelming capacity for violence that is held in check only by the decision to be something better. Threshold 9 is quiet now. The Apex Plague is a memory preserved in a secure archive, but the lesson remains. If you see a human, remember Elena. Remember the nurse who became a filter. Remember that she didn't do it because she was told to. She did it because someone had to stand in the middle of the bridge. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the true nature of Earth's warfare network, make sure you hit that like button. We have more stories from the frontier coming your way, from the halls of the Galactic Council to the furthest reaches of the mid-spiral. Drop a comment below and let me know. Do you think the humans are the galaxy's best hope or its greatest mistake? And as always, stay curious. The stars are watching, and so are the humans. Peace through strength. That is the old human concept, and now it is the galaxy's new reality. I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories. Hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest uploads.